Good evening and welcome to Tuesday's Encounters from New York. This program is presented every Tuesday at 7 p.m. New York time. My name is Mark Beecher. I'll be your host tonight. Our very special guest tonight is Mr. J.J. Raschel from Austin, Texas, CEO and founder of J.J. Raschel Awaken Your Truth. Tonight, he will introduce us to a program of NeuroQuantum Awakening, self-mastery in 5 days. So welcome, JJ, and if you could log on and introduce us to your program.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ernie, behind the scenes here for having me on. I'm very grateful to be here. It's a great opportunity to share with your audience and hopefully add a ton of value for y'all. So thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Um, yeah, so like Mark said, my name is JJ Rochelle, and I run a course called Awaken Your Truth. And really, before I get deep into what that is, I'd love to share a little bit about my backstory and where I come from. I'm originally from New Mexico, and I was raised by my grandma, and she had all these different books and literature from old text, old ancient teachings, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, different traditions from many different perspectives. And I took a liking to those things for whatever reason I was called to them. And I spent a lot of time by myself uh, reading through all these books, not always understanding, obviously, and having a lot of questions as well. But seeing a lot of alignments that really led me down the path that I was to follow. And if I can just share a quick story, there's a story that really relates to, the reason why why I even stumbled upon what I call neuro quantum awakening. These are all compilation terms from neurolinguistics and neuroscience, along with quantum physics, and also obviously awakening, which we would call spiritual awakening, the path of spiritual awakening. So one of the biggest things that really stuck with me since I was a child, about 3 years old, sitting in my little room and playing with toys. And I had this experience where, my parents were out in the other room, they were fighting. And I felt kind of alone in there and a little bit scared and feeling like unsure about a lot of things. And I remember in this moment, for whatever reason, I had an experience where I left my body and I went into a place of what felt to me initially as like complete darkness and complete utter space, like outer space. And I could see stars coming in the distance that were very, not very prominent or very strong. But the darkness wasn't scary. It was actually like warm, and there was a deep hum around me. And this out of this darkness came what I would only be able to call as like stardust, like a stardust light that kind of wrapped around me. And mind you, I'm this 3, maybe 4 year old little kid. Um, and so I didn't fully understand obviously what was going on. And I don't, looking back, I know that I really wasn't fully conscious of what was happening. But in this presence, what seemed like a dream, uh, a voice was there. And this voice was not saying words, but it was telling me things with the sound that it emanated. And it just told me that I was okay and everything's going to be okay. And the story that links me to living with my grandma is that my parents struggled with addiction for most of their lives. And I needed, support, my brother and I. And my grandma took in kids from all over the place. She raised kids from all different places around the world, actually, over 40 foster children. So she was a huge inspiration in my life. And I just remember many times playing with all the kids where I would step away and I would have these experiences for whatever reason where I would leave my body and have this experience of deep presence, deep love, deep joy, deep protection. And even with all these experiences, what I came to realize is that I believe that we all have the stuff, the brain, the the receiver for receiving a divine message, whatever we call it, the universe, spirit, God. And through that stuff, that brain stuff and the body stuff and all the things we're made out of from this universal cosmic play that seems to be going on here, I recognize looking back only that even amidst all these beautiful experiences, I still had this tendency to focus on negative things that happened to me, which in turn actually caused me to forget a lot of the beautiful things. And so I would love to share, just like there was this part of every time I would have a struggle, I would go to my grandma and she would share with me these gems of wisdom. And really, it would ultimately end with something she would say to me every time that I always felt like I wanted to be nurtured by her, felt like I wanted comfort and things. And she would just always say this one thing to me. She said, "Oh, just rise above it." And, you know, at the time as a kid, I'd even come to this point where I felt almost a little bit angry, like I needed something more from her. I needed more support, more comfort in that situation. And so there was, you know, a little bit of frustration there, but I didn't always understand what she meant by that. And along the way, as I had children and grew a business and embarked in music and all these different things, that voice was always there, rise above, to just rise above what was going on. And I didn't fully understand that. I recognize, as simple as it seems and as, you know, motivational as it can be. The day that she passed away, I asked her, before we knew that was the day, obviously, I asked her a question. I said, you know, and she was about 92 at this point. I asked her, "Grandma, what is it that you really want right now?" And she said, "Oh, I just want to rise above." And it just hit me. It just flooded me with obviously a lot of emotion. One of my favorite people in the whole world. She was moving on to the next realm, and throughout all of our time together, there was this really special thing that she used to do for me. She would always put aside these books, these special books that had to do with all spirituality, mysticism, uh, wisdom, knowledge, philosophy, things like this. And throughout all my time living with her since I was about 5 years old, I had never come across any book um, that I didn't quite, you know, understand. You know, obviously I didn't understand them all fully. It took a long time, lot of journey, a lot of seeking, a lot of venturing, and practice as well. But there was one book that I found when I was about 13. I asked her if I could have it, and it was called Path of the Masters. And I opened it up, and when I first looked at it, I started reading it. It actually kind of like scared me a little bit. I didn't understand why fully, but I just felt like I just wasn't ready for it. And so that day that she passed away, I realized that she'd given me, in the final stack of books that she had right before her passing, she'd given me a stack of books, and in that stack was this book called Path of the Masters. And a year from that day that she passed away, after reading that book, I realized I had to fully embrace the spiritual journey for myself and really truly dig for myself down deep to what the truth is for me. What was my truth? How was I going to find it? And why? Right? And through this book, Path of the Masters, I realized so many different things of why spirituality and science and all these things are saying different things, but why they're also saying the exact same thing. And for me personally, I realized it was, for me, identical. And this process that I understood was simply a process of soul science, science of the soul. And I started to have experiences a year later after she had passed. I had ended up getting an initiation from the teacher from this path, and I started to practice this meditation. And the first meditation that I did, I had an experience like that day that I was in my room. I felt like I left my body, and I went into a nothingness, a black, dark, just complete void of nothingness, where there was it was like such darkness that it was almost unbearable. I could feel it. I felt like it was on my body even, which is very strange. And out of that darkness came that same light, that same stardust of light that came around me. And it didn't speak with words. It just gave me an understanding that it was with me all along. And so that was about 11 or 12 years ago. And since then, I've been really diving into the depths of quantum physics and neuroscience and neurolinguistic programming, NLP as it's known. And I began really developing some skills with those things so I could help other people um, from all walks of life, all faiths, all backgrounds, connect to a deeper part of what I call their receiver, and prime their receiver to be able to receive divine connection and love and embrace and wisdom and a knowledge that is deeper than worldly knowledge that many times just can't be translated. And it's often for us to have ourselves. And so this was what set me off on the course of really compiling all of these different teachings, and recognizing, when you're in maybe you're playing a murder mystery game or something like that, and you just keep finding clues, right? You just keep finding clues that just like spark off this huge bolt of lightning within you. It feels like, of not only synchronicity, but also there's, for me, it was this acceptance that I'm just being guided every step of the way. And so what I did is I compiled my knowledge of quantum physics and the path that I had discovered through Path of the Masters, which is known as Surat Shabad Yoga, also known as Sant Mat or Shabad Yoga, and many different terms that can explain and describe what this practice is. But it's really about silencing the mind by focusing at the given point here and listening for inner sound and beginning to see inner light. And I really wanted to understand, not only on the depth of mysticism, but how it could be explained through quantum physics and a lot of the new sciences that are coming out these days, where they're discovering a lot of things that what I would say the mystics have been saying throughout history, from basically all traditions in some form or another. And so I really dug into quantum physics, and I started to, really recognize the similarities, especially when we begin to talk about the nature of reality. And that when a particle or when a wave of light is observed, we know scientifically now that it collapses into a form of a particle of light. And what that indicated for me was recognizing that, for one, that we are all connected by this wave, and we are all potentially collapsing this wave into existence of what we see, all simultaneously, collectively. And so, as trippy as that kind of gets, and the thoughts that come up with that, and the questions that come up with that, you can imagine I began to dig quite a bit deeper, and I started watching things like the Simulation Hypothesis, which is an amazing documentary that if anyone out there that's interested in looking those things up, definitely a lot of powerful work. But what it is implying through countless studies, NASA physicists that are, spending their life's work putting these papers out and getting them peer reviewed by all their highest esteemed colleagues and such, and everyone coming to the conclusion that these particles behave based on the way that we perceive them, right? And I don't know if anyone's heard of Dwayne Dyer. I'm quite sure that most people listening here probably have.
Right.
Yeah, and the power of intention and understanding that the way that we look at things literally changes the way that things are. It literally changes things. And so, man, this started to really intrigue me in understanding, bringing the gifts that we have, the deep seed soul that is within us of what we have to offer to the world, bringing that to the world. How do we make that come into existence? And there's always this achiever mode that we fall into. We strive and strive and strive to try to create it, and that's known as we could call Newtonian physics, where we're pushing against nature to try to make matter move, right? And I started to recognize through some work of people like Peter Sage, one of Tony Robbins' top trainers. He was one of my mentors for quite some time, and he explained it like this. He said, the first phase of our consciousness typically is victim mode, where we think everything is happening to us, and we're a victim of reality. And things that just happen that just, oh, why did that happen to me? We create a story around it. Why did this happen to me? And then we move into, eventually we get so tired of that and we realize we're not making any progress there. We come to the realization that we're just gonna have to do it all ourselves. So it all has to happen by me. And so we get into that achiever mode and we start doing everything we can to try to force our dreams, really. It's like we're moving upstream. It makes it really hard for us to make progress in that way, because even though we may, people reach million dollar businesses through these means, but they find themselves empty at the end of that journey, and wanting more, looking for more. Why am I not fulfilled? I have success, but where's my fulfillment, right? And so that's achiever mode, and we get burnt out on that. And if we're smart, hopefully we catch ourselves before we go too far with it. And then we realize there's a next step, is that's through me. And this is where we start really starting to get into not only how quantum physics works and understanding that the way we perceive things literally changes the way things are for us, but also that we have this vehicle of the body and the brain that can be primed to properly receive, to properly be as if it's like a conduit or antenna for what we would call divine, or God, or universe, or spirit. And what neuroscience has come to know now in this phase of through me, which Peter Sage always shares these 4 stages, and I'll get to the 4th stage in a second. But through me is this place where, we all know that process of flow state when we're doing something. It could be somebody flipping burgers, they get into flow state and they're just like, they're flowing with it, right? But then you get to, you think about people who are like in sports, like really high-end sports, they get into this flow. Or musicians. I always resonated deeply with that because I'm a musician and I've performed my whole life. And you get into this place where it's almost as if time stops and everything's effortless. And that's what I call when God shows up. His presence is in the room and everybody's feeling it. And there's this process that in neuroscience, they know there's a phase in that, getting into that process, that's the hardest part of the process. And because it's the hardest part, the most struggle is seen, the most restriction and resistance is felt. Most people give up at that point, right before that flow state. And we know through neuroscience that this is actually one of the most pivotal moments in any process of learning, any process of developing skills, any process of meditation, when we think of it from that point of view, or prayer as well. Because when the mind is giving you the most trouble and fighting you the most, your brain is actually creating what's called myelin, which is a white coating around the neural circuits that's actually creating a new pathway for you, a new pathway for your brain to be able to receive new information. The old model, the old brain, the old neural network is not wired to be able to receive that type of information yet. And so it may get glimpses here and there, but it's not primed to receive optimally. And so that's one of the reasons why when we're working at something we want to achieve, we're trying to do something that maybe is a little bit outside of our comfort zone and we're not quite used to it yet. And a lot of people, myself included, in the past, I've given up that moment, right? And that's the most pivotal moment, because like we said, as an evolutionary adaptation, our brain started to create this thing called myelin, which basically optimizes the brain's ability to learn and understand and receive on a way higher level. And so, with that being said, we understand that if we move past that moment, or at least if we recognize in that moment that's what's actually going on, it actually gives us that burst of motivation to keep pushing through. And on the other side of it is that flow state. Now, flow state it's an arguable term because it can be expressed like it's alpha brain waves or it's even gamma brain waves. And so what I consider flow state, just for the sake of generalization, is that it is any place where just after that struggle point, we enter into a place of what is I call a level of super consciousness or even unconscious competence, where we're able to do something without, it's like we've done something so many times, we're unconsciously competent. We could do it with our eyes closed, right? It gets to that point in this phase, even when we haven't done it a million times. And on like the next level, right? Where it seems something greater than ourselves takes over, and we're what many call channeling, potentially, right? Or even in meditative state, we have come into oneness, and the body's kind of dissolves. We don't necessarily recognize we even have a body at that moment, and we are one with this presence and energy and life force that is there with us. And so to relate this to that the neuroscience behind this is that neuroscience is actually finding that there are 4 phases of this that directly correlate to what my good friend Peter Sage shared with me a few years back. Is just to finish up what Peter Sage says, the 4th stage is as me. As me is when we recognize that everything that we see in the world is a reflection of ourselves. It is us. It is me. And we could probably think of many people throughout history that we would say were in that level of consciousness. Jesus Christ, Buddha. We could think of many different names throughout history that we each individually potentially could recognize as being at that level of conscious attainment. And so if we relate it, though, back to the 4 stages of neuroscience, we understand that neuroscience is actually categorizing these things based on actual findings that they have when they study someone in a meditative state. And people from every single background, no matter what tradition they come from, when they start to have that experience of heightened awareness and spiritual upliftment and this feeling of presence, and that God is coming to see them, connecting with them, talking to them, they're experiencing the divine. They across the board, no matter what belief system they have, their brain is doing the exact same thing every single time. And so they know that the neural patterns that are being created at that moment, they began to categorize them in 4 categories. The first is mindfulness, and that's when we begin to feel the presence and the quiet. Okay, and then the second is loved and held. We begin to feel like we're loved and held, and it fires off the same neural pattern that fires when we are physically loved and held. And so the argument there is, well, is it just reactivating a memory from something? Or because of the testimony from all of these people who are expressing that in that moment they felt held and embraced by a presence, whatever they call God or Allah or Hari Ram or whatever your name for God or universe is. In that present moment of feeling that, they each expressed that it was that presence holding them, which for neuroscience, and maybe a lot of people in this community, it's not anything new, but for neuroscience, it's very a kind of a new thought that the brain is actually a receiver and a conduit, not consciousness is actually being created from the brain, which is the previous notion that consciousness is created from the brain. And so this is actually in some way disproving that understanding that the brain is actually a receiver. receiving. And so that's in science, as I said, for most people here, it's probably not a new notion, but for science, it's a big breakthrough. So that's good news in the field of science. And then the third phase in neuroscience, where they categorize this experience of spiritual experience, transcendent experience. Step 3, they depict as from being in a narrow focus, it broadens to a very, very broadened focus of awareness. And we can get signal or feedback or receive message or understanding from many times the people who are in these experiences explain it as it's coming from a specific direction. And so they begin to receive things from different directions. And as just personally, I can attest to many experiences that directly align with these. And I'm sure that you all probably have a lot of your own as well. And step 4, the understanding that we're never alone. So the neural network that fires off at this 4th phase of the neuroscience's basically categorizations of this process is that the same firing and wiring that happens in the brain when we experience our family, when we experience being in a community, a network of people, and we're feeling very connected to those people, very in rapport, at a heightened level, the same thing fires off in this 4th stage of that experience, that spiritual experience. And so what I've come to realize is that if we take it back a few steps and we say, okay, well, maybe we haven't experienced some of these deeper experiences yet, and we're just trying to, live a positive life. And I would say that phase of our process is very overlooked many times, is just being capable of just having a just simply good, wholesome, abundant life. And abundant doesn't necessarily mean money, but it is an expression of that we always are capable of having enough, right? The notion that we always have access to what is, meant for us. And so if we take it back to that step, which is what I would call self-development or personal growth and development 101 or 0.1, whatever we want to call it, is, we just want to really start to get a hold of what it is we're thinking on a daily basis. So I would say the very first step of this 5-day transformation that I speak of in NeuroQuantum Awakening, it really comes back to understanding what our true values are. And the reason that I bring it back to values is because we unconsciously are being ran by a subconscious program that is meant to keep us safe. It's meant to keep us in the known. We all have human needs. And so we try to meet those needs through the means of safety, from, in a way, a defense mechanism that was created based on things that have happened to us in the past. And this neural network that is created, they see is definitely related to unconscious patterns, unconscious beliefs that we create along the way. So in this journey, we start to become conscious of these old thoughts and beliefs about ourselves, that maybe we're not good enough, maybe we're not worthy, maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe I'm broken, all these different things. When we start to become very aware of these things and recognize what is it that we truly want, what is it that where is it we're settling for less than what we actually truly, what's calling us from within. In those moments of recognition, when we can just consciously look at those thoughts that are actually running our life constantly every day and bring it back to how is that there's a difference between what I'm getting and a difference between what I want. And so when we recognize that there is a pattern that's going on that's keeping us tied to the things we don't want, And we can bring this back to the reticular activating system. Its core job in the brain is to focus on that in which keeps you safe, or that in which is relevant or important to you. And so we all know the old saying, you buy a yellow car and then all of a sudden you see yellow cars all over the place. Like, how did that happen? How all of a sudden people bought all these yellow cars? No, it's just that the reticular activating system is now focusing on that as being important to it. And so it starts to recognize patterns. Okay. And so if there was some trauma that happened to us, our reticular activating system sets up a network that is for the sake of protection to keep us safe, so that when we start to recognize that pattern, we have a defense against that. And usually it's, fight, flight, or freeze, basically, right? And many of us have subtle forms of those behaviors in the way that we go about life. And so when we start to recognize the thoughts that are connected to that, we can start to understand that perhaps there's a cycle that is not of our best interest in regards to our growth. Yeah, it's going to keep us safe, it's going to keep us in the known, but is it actually beneficial and resourceful for our growth? And so when we begin to recognize those thoughts, and we can couple that with the understanding of the nature of reality, one of the greatest questions I think was ever posed to us was from the great scientist Einstein, Albert Einstein. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, one of the greatest questions we can ask ourselves is what kind of universe we live in. And from my knowledge, the reason that he asked that question was because he recognized that based on the way that you perceive reality is the way that that reality shows up. And so when we start to bring ourselves back to that understanding a little bit, and understanding if we're thinking constantly about things that we don't want to happen to us, and it puts us in that same emotional state, which is a cycle, then we can possibly say that we're actually in some way creating those circumstances for ourselves. So a big part of the first step is recognizing the untruth of these potential negative or unresourceful thoughts that are keeping us safe, but potentially not for our greatest growth, for our greatest potential. Recognizing the untruth. And in a second, I'm going to share, when I'm done with the 5 steps, I'll share a very powerful 6-step process that everybody can go through to really just begin the process of kind of becoming aware and replacing the old negative thoughts with some more positive thoughts. And so in that process, step 2 is rebuilding. As we said, once we found our value, what we truly value in life, what are our true values, then we can start to reorient our behaviors, our thoughts around that highest value. And it's, in a way, it's kind of a reversal process, like a reverse engineering process. If I want to be this person who thrives with abundance and joy and empowerment and love, I know that these behaviors that I have now aren't congruent with that. And so I'm going to go in and see what I can do otherwise. And it's going to be uncomfortable at first because I'm going to be going against a previous neural network and nervous system that's conditioned to that old way of being, which is all firing and wiring based on old emotions as well, which are all chemicals. And so it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable in that beginning stage. And so then in that process, we want to be able to reactivate our passion. So the first is reprogram, second is rebuild, third is reactivate. This third step, reactivate, is where we reconnect to that greater vision of empowerment, what it is that is truly calling us from within us, and being able to tap in deeper to what it is that child really wanted. Who did they see as their heroes? Who did they see themselves as the hero, right? And I know that most of us have some form of story that is connected to something of that sort. And I would say that that's the divine seed calling us, pulling us into our truth. And it's not the most comfortable path, but I believe that it's the most incongruent with our truth and our true calling, right? So the fourth stage is realization. When we finally make it past that, what I would call the really the biggest struggle, we come to a level of realization. We start to see the big picture. We start to regain self-worth. self-worth that's not tied to the amount of money in our bank account. It's not tied to um, an idea of who we thought we were supposed to be based on fitting in with a certain type of society. It's not based on survival either. It's based on something much deeper, something I call the soul, something I call spirit. And it's at a deeper level that shows up in everyday life for you when you have this realization. You start to have synchronicities, and neuroscience is showing now that these synchronicities actually can somewhat be predicted based on the phase, as I shared earlier, of the four-step process that you go through in the presence of that divine experience. And they know that they can look into the patterns of, let's say another person, and they can see that there is a congruence in the way that their firing and wiring is happening when those simultaneous or synchronistic things happen, which is super powerful because, those of us who have been on like a spiritual path for a very long time, that's very simple. But again, science is catching up with us finally, and it's going to, I believe it's going to help get all of our messages out there even further, and also bring a lot more knowledge for a lot of us who are still struggling with some doubt and some fear, and which all of us do. So these are the only things that can um, create a wider and broader foundation for us. And so step 5 after realization is revelation. That's when we've stepped into a place where we've fully embodied the vision of who we are and who we want to become. And oftentimes those who talk from this place, they constantly say, I am. And it's no longer, I am tired, I am broke, I am mad, I am upset. It's more like, I am thriving, I'm on fire, I am great. Like blatantly being able to speak it out loud right in front of people. And you recognize that in people that truly feel it. And when you are among those people who truly feel it, you actually start to feel it yourself, which brings me to the next step, which is past day 5. So that's the 5 days. Day 5 is, and obviously it does take time. It's not going to happen in 5 days perfectly for anybody, but we can walk through this process in 5 days and have deep breakthroughs. But we want to go past just breakthroughs, and we want to actually break through, right? So with that being said, proximity is power. Being amongst people that you want to, you aspire to be with or be like, and be able to not copy, but model certain behaviors and certain understandings about what got them where they got. And this could be everything from a spiritual community. This is why Sangha, and congregation and churches as well can be very powerful for us to cultivate the depth of us embodying that for ourselves. And obviously, we're going to find what's congruent for us and what is not. We're going to see that there's certain things that, oh, that's not quite in alignment. So, it's okay to move past. Now, at least we have a clarity on our value, right? What our true value in life is that we're striving for. And so once we get to this phase of where we're not only embodying who we know we're truly meant to be to some extent, there's always next levels, next levels, next levels, next levels. But now we're ready to actually start to share it with other people. And this is a place that I found myself in about 3 or 4 years ago, when I recognized, after my grandma had passed, after I'd been on this spiritual path for a very long time, and relatively long time, and recognizing that there was something I had to share and that I was worthy to share it. And I'm going to say right here that everyone listening here is worthy of sharing their experience and their understanding. And there are thousands and thousands of people out there who would benefit from your experience. And so with that all being said, I want to share a very powerful 6-step process with everyone. That's okay. Mark, you got any questions?
No, please go ahead. But I was sort of saying that for the 5 steps, we have to refine our focus, and we have to sort of be determined to move just from our conscious beings more toward our super conscious, to where we become more universal in our actions and in our thoughts. We'd be spend actually more time moving toward that. I mean, on a daily basis. And for me, it's difficult to say, okay, I always look at the daily news. I look at this and that. And I become aware that has real no value to me other than entertainment.
Yeah.
But to just refocus and set my lifestyle forward so that I can achieve some of these goals. That's
So true. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And, we've unfortunately in most of our society, we've been trained up, even, our parents unconscious of this in many ways, but we've been trained to believe that, news and things like this, we need those things in our lives, and, it's okay to know what's going on in the world. But another thing in regards to like proximity is power. It's like food that we digest. The things we see on the news, they know for sure through science, through this neuroscience, knows that news activates cortisol on exponential levels when we watch the news. And so it brings up these questions, like I don't want to get into any kind of conspiracy or anything like that, but it's like we know how to sell to people, right? And that's through fear. And typically the news I've found is one of those things that definitely is causing that, is trying to sell at least an idea at minimum. Um, Even if the broadcasters are unconscious of what that idea is. Yeah, committing to, and here's a great thing to add to what you said, Mark, because that was absolutely amazing. Because, there's this process of like, am I really ready, or do I want to commit to this, or is this the right path for me, or things like this. And what I would say is that beliefs about ourselves are actually just decisions. So being ready to make a decision, even if it's scary, and just being ready to dive in and just say, I'm making a decision for myself, for my life moving forward, and I am going to commit to my empowerment, my awakening, my unification with that oneness, that divine oneness that I already am one with, but I just need to uncover some layers, some old patterns that are kind of just in the way. So yeah, that's definitely it's a commitment for sure. Does that add to what you said?
Yes, and I'm just reflecting on the story as you told it. You made this commitment at a fairly young age to to search and uh, look into yourself.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking at part of your discussion was that the superconscious uh, essentially makes us more intuitive, but it makes us more connected to the universe outside of us. It takes us outside of our body to the rest of the universe, and then there's so much more. As you said, it's not even knowledge. It's just energy. It's just love. It's emotion, feelings. It's it's not the uh, our conscious knowledge. It's
Yeah.
much more than that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great discernment, because there's so many times that I think, or maybe most of the world doesn't think about, like, we're we're not our mind, we're not our body. Those are just mechanisms, and this intellect that obtains knowledge and stores knowledge and memory and all these things, those are that's data, that's calculated knowledge, and could be, that it's our sanskaras, our past lives, our karmas, right? All these things. But when we just kind of take a step back and recognize those moments of that deep presence and peace and oneness, that intellect's not there, right? And there's this other level of knowing and experience that I love what the word you're using, super conscious. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. You are going to relay a story to us.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay.
So I want to share 6 steps that are really transformational, and they're so simple, but they're extremely transformational. And I would say this helps with anything in anyone's life where they're feeling a struggle and feeling like they um, have the need to make the next step, move past this barrier, this block. Um, and so this process is what I call 6-step process to neuro quantum awakening, and it's super simple. And this is scratching the surface, but this is huge value because it's one of those things that when we learn it, it's not just 6 steps. It actually happens. We can do it in like 20 seconds, right? And it can help us reorient to our vision, our calling, and our understanding of the nature of reality. So, step one is to notice when you've moved into a primal state. Notice when you've moved into the state of fear, anxiety, um, overwhelm, burnout, depression. All of these things are connected to the sympathetic nervous system. And that sympathetic nervous system is, as we said, it's all wired based on the need for survival. Okay. So this next step is crucial in regards to understanding that step two is knowing that the only thing that is causing you to move into that primal state is your own thinking, which really helps us understand that if we're not being chased by the lion or we're not in actual physical danger, the only thing causing that fear or that overwhelm or anxiety is literally our own thinking. It doesn't exist outside of us. So then step three is to take a look at what that thinking really is. What is that thought? What is that belief? And spell it out for yourself, write it out for yourself as clearly as you possibly can in the way that your brain, your mind is saying it to you. That unconscious thought is saying it to you. When you become aware of it, step four is that you begin step four to accept the possibility that if it's moving us into a primal state, then it's absolutely not true. So in that step, it is very critical that we are able to really see it for its untruth. And we don't just bypass over that step where we just say, okay, well, that's not true. And we just move on to that. We really want to consciously see how it's untrue. And so that's really critical in that step. Step five is if it's not true, then some form of the opposite must be true. And so that can show up as like maybe the thought or the belief was initially was, man, I'm just not worthy. I'm just not good enough to do that. And when you see and recognize how untrue that is, you can recognize, okay, well, that means actually some form of the opposite literally has to be true. Okay. And then step six, the final step, and this is the most critical. And if possible, at any moment that you go through this process, you're able to go back into a form of mindfulness for yourself, whatever practice you use. Go into a state of meditation or prayer and go back and collect and harvest all the evidence that this new empowering belief is true. Now, the significance of this and the reason this is so critical is that when we are able to follow the same process that we follow unconsciously, where we go back into the past, we remember why we're so unworthy, remember all these things that are negative, and so we literally, our body doesn't know the difference. We're literally living in the physiology of that old self, experiencing the old emotions as if it's right now. And it keeps us tied to the to the old situation, the old paradigm. And so if we can follow the exact same process and go back and harvest all the good fruit and see all the good things that our reticular activating system in its need to keep us safe didn't allow us to see, go back and we harvest all the good fruit. And then we sit in that presence, in that emotional empowerment that we know that it's true. Now, it does take us really I've had quite a few students who have said, like, I can't even think of a time that I've gone back and actually, or that I can see that I was empowered or something, right? And the more we dug, the more boom, it started to open up, and they realized there was a lot of stuff that they literally forgot about their life. And so I would just throw a little bit of a challenge to everyone, is that if there's any, part of you that's saying, well, maybe there's none of that there, like, like maybe I haven't done anything great, or maybe I'm not, just keep going. Look for every bit of evidence, every thread that may be able to pull, that may be able to open that thing up for you to see that you're a magnificent, divinely guided, epic, immaculate being that's been guided all along. And when you start to have that recognition for yourself, that realization for yourself, and you feel that right now, and you start to, now you have your values and you have the vision of your future now as well, what you truly want to become, not what you want to get per se. That's part of it. Yeah, those things fill in as you go, but who do you want to be? And that person that you want to truly be is actually already who you are. So once you recognize that, all the layers begin to fade off. All the layers begin to dissipate, as they say, right? And your body doesn't know the difference, whether that is then or now, just like it did for the past. Now, brought it into the present moment. And this comes back to quantum physics and relating it to that every part and particle of existence is equidistant to whatever that source that is creating it. Every particle is equidistant to that source, which brings up non-locality, which brings up a lot of other quantum things that we could get into, but I'm sure we don't have time for. So yeah, that's NeuroQuantum Awakening right there. And I would love to answer any questions if there are any.
Well, um, and well, this is a 5 day, but how can this help somebody who's overcoming a trauma?
Yeah. So in fact, I would say this is like the best thing for someone overcoming a trauma. The main thing with people with really deep trauma, especially, is we take it slow, first of all, but recognize that you are not the byproduct of your trauma. And that's easy to say, but again, going through this process and seeing that these thoughts that are caused to put you into a fearful state, you don't have to live in that state anymore. If you can accept that for a second and say, okay, I can look to the past and see that that may have been what caused that, but that's not happening now. So the only thing causing it is my thinking. So that's the only place I need to actually do any work necessarily at this moment. So I need to go in and I need to see how that thought is not true. That belief about myself is not true. And when I can recognize that that belief about myself is not true, then it's actually just by nature that the opposite is true. And so then we go and we harvest all of the potential truths that are there for you, all of the grand experiences that you have had that we, due to our focus on the negative, weren't able to even comprehend many times, but they're there. And so being able to go back and harvest the good stuff, that doesn't mean that it's just going to eliminate it all right then and there, right? Because we are on a process of progress, right? It's a process of progress. And So another thing that this can help with trauma is recognizing that potentially, and this is up to everybody's own discretion to decide if this is true for you or not. The most empowering place that you can be in as a human being is to recognize that you are at cause, that you are the creator of your own reality, and that you are in partnership with whatever you call as your higher power when you come to that place. So from that perspective, if we can just consider that, and we know we're not there yet, but we can at least consider, like, okay, what would that be like to just try on some of those beliefs? And once you start to try on some of those beliefs that I'm actually the one creating my reality, it brings up a lot of myriad other questions, right? Why did I create this? What is, doesn't mean that we're at fault for things that have happened for us per se, but it does mean that we have the present ability to create something new for us, to change our story. And that really does tie into a lot of neuro-linguistic programming. Tony Robbins shares this stuff all the time. A great example of Tony Robbins' example of this would be the 3S pattern. He talks about we always try to go and take a new strategy to change our life and create a new career or do whatever we're going to do, overcome trauma. What's the best strategy to overcome trauma? Well, it's actually not strategy first. Strategy is the last step. The first step is changing our state of being. How do we do that? What can we be truly grateful for right now? And just for just a second, forget about that trauma. Just for a second, what can we be grateful for, proud of that we did today? Puts us in a different state of being. And then we can consciously go in and, like, let's just make a new story. Second S is story. So state, story, go back and just like change the story, which is very connected to what we just talked about with the sixth step of going back and finding all the good fruits, harvesting all the good stuff that you did, that you are, that you were, that happened to you, all the things that happened in your past that were actually very good, that we stopped focusing on. So change your story. And then from that, the strategy is going to unveil itself. It's just going to reveal. You wouldn't have gotten the right strategy if you hadn't done that first. You'd be getting the strategy for the old self, for the disempowered self. Does that make sense?
Right. Now, I know you spoke about some of the physics, and some of the scientists are delving deeper into this and really coming up with conclusions that there is spirituality, that they're not sure how to measure it, but they know it's there because it's a component that they haven't learned how to measure yet, but it's there, and they're waiting to develop those constructs.
Mm-hmm.
I know earlier on, like, we're just talking about American society. So really, people who are searching for these truths, for this spirituality, are right now somewhat isolated, at least to my way of thinking. But you mentioned yoga before, and some of those societies that really practice yoga, practice this collective knowledge and these collective religious rituals and things, are they more spiritual? Are they more advanced than general Western civilization, do you think?
I don't think that there's, I think that there is a level of different advancement within each society, that some of them exceed other societies and some of them don't. So if we were to talk specifically about spiritual practice, we could talk from the lens that, for India, if we were to talk about specifically, those practices have been passed down through, thousands and thousands and thousands of years prior to Jesus Christ, even, right? And so we could say in one way that potentially there's been an ancient knowledge that's been protected and maintained and sustained through that society. But then we could also equally say that that's just more time that it can grow farther from the truth as well. And so I would say that the level of advancement is all dependent, from my perspective, on each individual. And it's not society based, although if we were to get into not things like spiral dynamics, I could explain to you a very specific way that even neuroscience and neurolinguistic programming can explain different modes of evolution, basically within the psychological patterns of different societies, and how there are different parts of society that they're making steps towards a specific goal, which ultimately, even in spiral dynamics, ends with spiritual awakening. Like everything ends there, right? If you look at books about the great one is Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins, which is the study of kinesiology, and he explains a lot of amazing things in regards to the scale of consciousness. And so those things, while I would say maybe a slight more prevalent in the East, in India and different parts of Asia and things like that, I would say equally there's certain parts of society, in every society, that are also at the basic levels as well.
Beyond the individual, are we society or individual societies making some advancements in terms of evolutionary thoughts in terms of spirituality? Are we growing? Are we advancing?
Yeah, I would say we are. I would say we are. We're absolutely advancing. Unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately in the greater scope, but there's these phases of uncomfortability and what seems to be chaos, right? In quantum physics, it explains that when you look within any form of molecular structure and you see what they call entropy, which is their word for chaos, their word for love and cohesion and unity is low entropy, right? So when you look within a molecular structure and you see that there is entropy within it, at first, when scientists started to see this, they couldn't figure out a pattern. They didn't have any pattern recognition within this what seemed chaotic molecular structure, and it eventually just kills itself off. But when they re-enter that into the ecosystem in which it came from, and they broaden the scope of which they're looking molecularly within that structure, they see that entropy was actually a smaller part of a greater growth that was actually very pivotal and crucial to the greater growth of that entire ecosystem. And so then they start doing all these formulas and equations based on these findings, and they start taking all the variables involved and all these things to create the math behind it. And then they start to come up with these things that really basically at this point prove that there's actually no such thing as chaos. Like there is no such thing as chaos. Because the broader you go, each time you find that it's actually just this temporal moment, this temporary time period of some kind of conflict that actually is for the greater good of the greater entity. And so for me, that understanding really sells it all for me, really. And it's something that I've seen in my life as well. I've recognized that pattern as well for myself. And if we were to get into spiral dynamics a little bit, I don't want to go too advanced or whatever, because it is a very big thing to unpack. But, each level that we step up in phase, and there's colors associated that they associate with each phase. Each time we step up, there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of conflict. And so what I would say is that it's if you were to say it in like a kind of a barbaric way, it's like the old does die off in a way that's if it's not in congruence with this greater growth, this greater unity, this greater collective oneness, it fades away. eventually. But it's going to do its part in, you could think of it like that, is that it's going to do its part in strengthening the whole thing, though, because then that greater entity has something to overcome, and we can relate that to our own fears, that the fear that we have within us may be a microcosmic replica of that same process. It's something that's actually a good thing that we should embrace. Each time we have a fear, oh, beautiful. Thank you for giving me that divine guidance that that's what I am to overcome now, that I see what my limitation is. Now I can treat that, and overcome that.
Um, all right, there's a lot of information that you're putting out, and how do you offer that in general? I mean, other than a little podcast like this, do you have an everyday offering that you give, or courses, speaking?
Yeah. So I offer upfront, I do a 5-day free, basically one-on-one workshop with me, where you can work with me one-on-one to overcome anything in your life that's limiting you or keeping you blocked from moving into the next phase of your life. And then from there, I always share what it would be like for people to work with me. Usually it's a 3, 6, or 12-month process in course and unlimited one-on-one coaching, and also a group setting as well that they get entry into, to have fellow people going through the similar process as them. And so, yeah, that's the Awaken Your Truth process that I've developed over the time, and it's basically, it is the NeuroQuantum Awakening. So
And I mean, that's a lot. I was just going to say, do you have any new projects that you're working on?
yeah, I do have some new projects. I'm actually a musician and an artist as well, and I'm releasing some music. I haven't released music in quite some time. After taking a break from my music career and jumping into coaching about 3 years ago, it started to take precedence, and it's been a while since I've released music. So music is coming up for me. I'm just released a new song called One People. I haven't been promoting it or anything like that. I've just kind of just been secretly releasing it to people close to me, and letting them know it's out there. So, but everyone can definitely go and find at jjandthemystics.com. All my music is there. So those are some of the new projects, and also ways for you to get in touch with me in regards to spiritual coaching as well. So yeah.
Okay. It's been a lot. It's been very interesting, but it's a lot of information.
A lot to digest.
Yeah. Uh, could you do a quick summation for us in the last hour?
Yeah. So basically, how long do you want me to take, basically?
That it's up to you. I mean, we can stay here all night.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, the way I would sum it up, and before I get into it, is there any way we can actually answer a question from Yeshiva, or do we want to wait till after? I think
Um,
Yeshiva has her hand up.
yes, if she wants to. Um,
Yeshiva, would you like to come on and ask a question, or?
Yes, yes, thank you. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much for all the amazing information you've given us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's super powerful and helpful. So
Thank you.
that's first off. And second, I know you mentioned the program that you're offering if we want to work with you for someone who does the 5 days. You said, I need more help with this because, there's a lot of untangling to do. Can you, I'm so sorry, I heard you, but I would like to, if you could please repeat how to find you and how to find, like how to get in contact with you to work with you more in depth.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and I believe they're gonna leave the links down below as well, the description. But for now, absolutely, you can email me at jj@igniteartistmastery.com. And you can also, a great way to get in touch with me to learn more about it is through Facebook Messenger, and it's just JJ Raschel. You can connect with me there.
Thank you, JJ.
You're welcome. Thank you, Yeshiva. Yeshiva actually is one who referred me to the podcast, so thank you so much, Yeshiva. Appreciate it.
Well, yeah, thank you, Yeshiva, because JJ has been really, it's been really interesting. I don't know. I'm just sort of there were a few items that when we think of ourselves essentially as radio receivers, and we're getting a lot of information coming in. And I've had that thought for a long time in terms of creativity out of an individual brain. And I thought it was maybe a little too much to ask for. That it's, and that's why that's how we become universally attached. We're not really transmitting those requests out to the universe. We're just receiving that information from the universe. And it's sort of a reinforcement for me, because it's something I've thought for some time, that, maybe it is the communications coming from a different direction than, we think as we're developing. We think, we're the center of the universe and all our ideas are going out to everybody else. But to me, that explains more intuition, that, receiving ideas, or ideas that people around the world come up with a similar idea in the same time frame. Those types of things have really been interesting to me. And I think, it leads us to motivate us to start making these changes, and start focusing on ideas where we want to move to, and, instead of just doing everything, same old thing every day, the way we've done throughout our lives, basically. So I think in that regard, you get us motivated to start moving,
Beautiful.
which is, we're very thankful for that. So, now you mentioned Ignite Artistry Mastery.
Yeah, igniteartistmastery.com.
Okay.
Yep. And it's just jj@igniteartistmastery.com. And for a very long time, I've worked with creatives to help them release their creative works through spiritual awakening. And so that was a program that is Awaken Your Truth is actually a part of. It's a bigger program, and it's a graduate program. So I don't typically share that up front, because it is, quite advanced in marketing and different things, and releasing music and art and these things. But the reason I really do start with Awaken Your Truth program as well is because no matter what it is that we're going to embark on in our journey in life, setting the proper foundation is key, and really dealing with all the old things that might get in our way, that will get in our way when we go to step out of that comfort zone and share, something that is maybe a work of love, out of music or art or creativity in any kind of way. And we want to be prepared and standing in a deep empowered state when we go to release that to people. And so, and just to give an overview, if that's, kind of where we're at, unless you have any more questions, I would love to answer those.
Well, before you do your overview, I just, because whenever we get in a discussion like this with people, and it's always a matter of, I always wish we could train this to kids, maybe like teenagers from 15 on up, or something like that, to really simplify their lives and to, give them a better understanding. Because, I think most of us, we're lost until our early 20s, probably. But I don't really see that happening. I don't know. Well, I wish it would, but I don't see it happening. So
I would say that it is happening, Mark. I would say that, for one, there was a reason Christ said, "Be ye as little children." I believe, and neuroscience does prove this now on many different occasions. They've put out papers on how people's brain states change when a child is in the room. And they don't know that that's what's happening. People aren't fully conscious of it. But when a child comes into the room, they are basically channeling source to some extent, right? The source power is coming through them on an exponentially higher level than those of us who have gone through life and become conditioned, right? And so I believe, this is my belief, that if we can simply just kind of give kids very simple ways to understand that the universe is on our side, it's not against us. When we have fear, that fear is actually there for us to overcome it, not to run from it. It's helping us grow and get stronger. And that place of joy and love and gratitude and happiness and fun, that's our natural way of being. And so anytime you don't feel that, you know that you're experiencing something that's not quite real, not quite true. Doesn't mean we can't be upset, doesn't mean we can't have fear and anger and those things. But so I think for kids, it's actually a lot simpler. We have complicated it a lot, right, as we've grown up. And I do believe that our youth needs this severely, for sure. You know, definitely teenagers, and helping them empower themselves, especially in high school and all these crazy,
Right.
peer situations. So I think that I think kids are getting the hang. I have 4 kids, so
Okay.
my kids are they're on top of it. Yeah, they have their ups and downs, but they it makes sense to them, and I want them to come to their own conclusions and their own understanding of all of it, and be able to be an open-minded skeptic. Don't just take everybody's word for it completely, but don't be closed off either to new information. So, yeah.
Okay. And you had some thoughts before I interrupted you there?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. I want to thank you. It's, as I said, it's been thought-provoking. It's been entertaining and enjoyable. And, it's every time I have a discussion like this, I'm more determined tomorrow to change. So I want to thank you for that.
I'm grateful to support. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? I mean, we have people on the line that are saying thank you, which is
Thank you, Luz.
which is
Thank
great.
you.
So
Thank you so much.
So if there are no other questions, then for everybody listening, next Tuesday at 7 p.m., we'll have another discussion. And until that time, I wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.